Good evening, everybody. My name is Omid. I'm your host. I'm the meetup organizer. Thank you for coming. If you could get a little bit closer, it will be easier to talk without the headset. I don't like using it, but I'll do my best to raise my voice. So, want to start with something a little bit fun before we go to the technical. Start with this one. I'm a skydiver. This is me with the blue helmet on a plane, jumping with 3 other people. I'm supposed to hold on very strong. I don't do that. And I'm flying over there.
You are Superman.
Yeah, I am Superman, yes, literally. So now we are struggling to get back together simply because I lost my grip. You can see me joining here. And the entire exercise is to hold hands together. And then we eventually break off. This guy was exercising, practicing to leave the group and rejoin. That's something very hard by itself. Relatively, we're doing a good job. Everybody are close to each other. That's it. So the whole idea was to grab your attention before I start and go too technical. Thank you very much. And to tell you the following. I'm a lecturer, but I get excited very easily. So I may come across as somewhat arrogant. Don't do that. Don't think of me as arrogant. Just like a small child, very excited, very passionate about what I'm doing. So feel free to talk, ask questions, interrupt, debate, whatever you do, whatever you want. It's more like a discussion and knowledge sharing, not pure lecture. Before I start, just want to thank you for subscribing to our meetup, and if you haven't, please join. It will help this community grow. All the lectures and slides today will be shared via the meetup website and via our YouTube channel. I kindly ask everybody to subscribe. It will help us to grow and to share the content. There's nothing commercial behind this meetup. It's all about knowledge sharing and helping the community and giving back. I'm really into that. I believe in helping people finding jobs. I don't take commission or anything. I just take a CV and connect them with other people who are looking for jobs. So if you need help, please feel free to contact me. You can find me via LinkedIn or via the lecture credentials in the end. And without further ado, I'll start talking. So today's lecture is all about, I just want to confirm the audio and video. Yeah, we're good. Today's lecture is all about cost reduction in BigQuery. I did a series of lectures in the last 2 years about architecture in cloud, Amazon, GCP. Here's the thing about architecture. It has to fit a use case. So not everything you do in terms of a use case will match an architecture. You have to really think about it. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of solutions. So you really have to know a lot. So the idea behind this meetup is demystifying the process of acquiring new knowledge, acquiring new tools, doing what's right for your company and your use case. So I call myself a big data ninja simply because I really like what I do, and I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, 3rd degree. As I said, I really love what I do, but feel free to challenge me. This is simply my opinion. There's no commercial sponsor behind me.
Is that a self-portrait?
This is a self-portrait of the Joker from The Dark Knight, I believe. And here we go. It's a nice scene there. Feel free to contact me and send comments. And let's talk a little bit about me. As I said, a black belt skydiver, This is the companies I work for. I do a lot of consulting in big data, and I help companies achieve their insights in data. 2 years ago, I started with this meetup, AWS Big Data Demystified, mainly focused on AWS solutions. Apparently, there's a lot of need for knowledge around there. Nothing is very simple. There's a lot of technologies, a lot of platform as a services there. There's a series of 4 lectures and 10 hours in YouTube just to demystify everything there. Again, always publicly available in our YouTube channel. As you can see, I worked with Walla in investing. Scream is a nice company that has a GPU database that handles mouse. Where's mouse? Scream. Scream. That would work for your use case. I just came across that. We just talked about their solution, and they're using BigQuery to query the last 3 hours, and they're doing that relatively a lot. That costs a lot, and there's a lot of data there. Scream would be a good use case. Talk to me if you like. I'll explain why. Big Data Demystified. As you understood by now, there are 3 meetups I opened in the last 2 years. One about AWS, this one about big data in general, and BI and analytics. We opened that 6 months ago. We had 2 successful meetups. Again, all lectures are available. And let's start. A long time ago, in a far galaxy, far away, everything was simple. Architecture was 3-tier architecture. You had a web server, an API, and a database, and a data warehouse in the background. Everything was simple. Then came big data. The amount of data grew exponentially, and everything started to explode, and the infrastructure kept breaking apart every now and then. Then came the cloud, a big tornado by itself, and I like to compare what I do in terms of big data, that when cloud and big data, it's like a tornado, meaning a volcano. It's a big mess. It's a 2-headed monster. And then the invoice comes in the end of the month, and the cost is making your project, in terms of ROI, very negative. And that's usually a problem. Again, the amount of technologies is too big. For instance, in investing.com, this is the technology stack we're using. There's Hadoop, there's Talent, there's AutoML, there's BigQuery, and it's a mess just to sort everything out. And actually, the ecosystem is growing by the second. The amount of technologies is staggering. I will clarify something. Nobody knows everything at all. You can build a data engineer profile from this stack, about 10, 12 different profiles. Okay, so it's a challenge. My solution is I use, despite the challenges, cloud and big data and data engineering methodologies to solve the ROI problem of a project. The agenda today will be to talk about GCP cost reduction, GCP Google Cloud Platform. SuperQuery, which is a solution I use, it's a startup, we'll talk about it. Airflow, some big data architecture, and hardcore cost-saving use case. By the way, I encourage you to ask questions, so raise your hands, tackle me, shout, attack, jump, anything you like to make this into a discussion. So part 1, the basics. Okay, if your company has a lot of the big data, say over 10 terabytes, okay, you need a big data architect. Okay, that will make sure everything will be fast, cheap, and relatively easily maintainable. Okay, if you fail to do that, your data project will likely be ROI negative. That means you will be paying too much cost, and eventually the project might be closed because the company will feel the insights are not worth the investment. There's a lot of training materials I created to educate the teams I'm working with, and freely available on our website. Again, this meetup is about knowledge sharing. Just about BigQuery, I created 100 slides just to cover all the features you need to work with BigQuery. So start learning BigQuery in depth. That will save you money, lots of money sometimes, and it will have a nice side effect in mind. The side effect will be that it will change the way the company employees think about infrastructure. They will have cost in mind, meaning every time I do a project, I write a query, I will think about the cost as part of my process. It's no longer about the technology, the business logic. You have to keep cost in mind. As a rule of thumb, a lot of people ask me, how high is too high in terms of cost for a query? As a rule of thumb, if your query costs more than $1, in some cases, it's okay, but in most cases, you're doing something wrong. So take that into mind. Just to get our sites aligned, the pricing in BigQuery is pay as you go. So every time you write a query, the engine, the database, runs on the data, and the data it reads, for every terabyte you read, you pay $5. So it's pay as you go. On the one hand, it's very easy to get started, but on the other hand, it's a double-edged sword. It might cost you too much. We have a report in investing about the top score in terms of cost for queries, and every month it's a different employee from the department, but bear in mind that mistakes are inevitable, so you should be a bit careful. There's a lot of things you can do in terms of cost to protect yourself. It starts by knowing the product. For example, import and export in BigQuery are free. So you don't pay anything. So it's very comfortable, and you can use that in your pipelines accordingly.
Question?
Yes, please.
If I do two processing, the cost is by processing, not by reading, right?
Per query. Meaning what? What's your question again?
The previous slide,
Yes.
you wrote that the cost is by processing. So if I do two processing, I multiply by 2, and then I multiply by 2 again. I pay twice?
Here's how it works. It took me a long time. It's a good question. The cost was about processing and data scan and cost structure. So let me simplify it for you. Let's say you write a query that's aggregates something, a column. So the cost will be the amount of data you read for this column. Let's say 1 terabyte. So you pay $5. But then what happens if you take the same query and you wrap that in another query, and another query, and another query, so you pay only once. You pay the $5 because you read it once, and the processing
It's pipelined.
is pipelined. However, there is a disclaimer. It sometimes may cost more. I'm not sure about what's the rules about this, but I heard on several occasions it costs more. For example, in the BigQuery machine learning, the query can do full scan on the data several times. So you build several times. In joins, there's a multiplier. I'm not sure why, but might be even more costly than just full scan. But yes, that's something to know. As a rule of thumb, queries in BigQuery, you should really try to avoid the select star, because in some cases, maybe even most cases, you don't need all the columns. It's a columnar base. column-based database. That means if you have 100 columns and you only need 2, you're paying additional 98 columns, which is not necessary. This is something most people don't know. If you write select star from T, meaning give me all the data, and you only apply limits to show only the first 3 lines, you bill for the entire data scan. Yes, it will be displaying only 3 lines, but the processing will continue in the background. So just avoid doing that. You can use, instead of doing limit, the table preview. This is for free. It's part of the console. You just click on it and you'll get it.
What is table preview? It's not an SQL statement.
No, it's part of your ID. Allow me to demonstrate. You are מה שנקרא מתקיל. No problem. I encourage you to do so. Let's take what you call a Charta table. You see this schema? If you press this preview, you get 100 lines for free.
100 lines.
You can scroll. It will be
But if you do limit 100,
chaval. You will pay,
okay.
in this case, select star form. 1 second, I get really excited when I'm in front of an audience.
Never do star.
Never do star, I'm just trying to emphasize a point. You will pay, in this case, not a lot. 2 over 100,000 parts of a dollar.
How did you get that? Yeah.
What?
How did you get this one?
This line? I will talk about this in a second. That's part of the trick.
I'm interested in the dollar.
In the dollar sign?
Yeah,
I don't know.
only getting
It's
the-
just right megabytes.
This is why you come here. I will share the knowledge, I promise. Okay? Give me a second. It's one of the slides in the, I just wanted to, you want to see something expensive? I show you. No, this is not expensive. Believe me, if you do a select star on a big table, chaval.
You can sort the preview table.
No, you can't do anything on the preview. You just can click on it and go on the next.
Why does limit not reduce the price?
Excellent question. Why does limit doesn't reduce the price? I don't know. It's a bit
Maybe
disappointing.
because you can order it. So if you do order by, then probably it needs to select everything and then
No,
order
it's
it and
regardless
then
of the order. It's regardless.
regardless.
By the way, in AWS Athena, it's you only pay for the limit you chose. If you selected 3 lines, you only pay for 3 lines. Okay, maximum bytes build is another option you can set in the, let's show it. You have here in more settings, query settings, maximum bytes build somewhere here. I never ever use it. I got a slide here. I'll show it in a second. You can set the amount of bytes as a limit, as a maximum limit for a query. I'll give you a tip. I never use it. It's kind of annoying for me.
The query requires more than that before one. I mean, it will cancel.
It will stop.
Anything, right? It won't be able
You will be billed only for the maximum you allowed. Okay? But again, I never use it.
But you'll do the entire process, like all the order by everything, all the joining. Eventually, it will be showing only the bytes.
Assuming the amount is you allowed is enough. I never use this, so I don't know if it will fail in the middle if it's not enough. So I don't know. I don't have.
It includes the processing memory, right? It's not just the preview.
No. You only pay for the maximum bytes build. It's for the bytes you read,
The one.
regardless of what you do in memory. You don't pay for the parts in memory. So you can exploit that if I hear you're thinking. By the way, streaming inserts, it's a feature, it's a cool feature. You can send events directly to BigQuery, which is cool, but you pay for it. So unless you need streaming, don't use it, okay? This is a slide for the maximum bytes build. See over here, you can set an amount, and it will most probably work. Quotas, this I do use. This is part of the settings of each GCP project. The settings you put are per project, and all the quotas and limitations are per day or per day per user, but not a specific user. Okay? So let's say you have 10 people in your department, and you want a total of 100 terabytes for the entire department. You can set that here per day. But you can decide only all the users cannot exceed 1 terabyte. So you'll have to have 100 employees in order to hit the limit. So you can play with that. Okay? On a personal level, what we do is we take per day a quota which matches the budget of the department, and we give the rest of the team per user 90% of it. So in the worst case, if someone made a mistake, it doesn't kill the entire budget, it leaves 10% for the rest to continue to work, because if you kill your budget, everybody can go home in terms of processing. Maximum bytes build, I don't use it, but you should know that the quotas are reset on PST midnight. That means around 9 in the morning in Israel time. So if someone starts to work in 8 in the morning, it might be blocked by 9 o'clock in terms of quota. Tips for performance, there are a lot of them, but you should know there are a lot of pseudo columns. Pseudo columns are columns you are not built for, but you can use in order to cut or filter away your data and to save money while you query. I strongly advise to denormalize when possible, to use instead of a nested query and a nested JSON, which complicates the query, to flatten everything to columns. So you'll be able to use the simplicity of BigQuery in terms of columnar database. It will make your life easy in terms of maintenance as well. You should know that there are several ways to partition the data. There's sharded tables, which are tables per shard, meaning, for example, you have 100 days, so each day is a table by itself. And then there's another way. You can do one table for the 100 days, and you can divide inside the table into 100 partitions. So as a rule of thumb, GCP doesn't recommend using sharded tables, but in practice, the table of Google Analytics is sharded. So you have to know both if you're using Google Analytics.
Shard by another column?
Shard is a table, actually, de facto.
No, can you do partition by name of another field, not the date?
Yes, you can.
Tricky. Yes, you can. It's a new feature. You can partition by date and another column. I believe it's int. So most people. Sorry?
String also.
String also? Really? Thank you. So most people do is by date and then by hour. You can do other stuff like approximate aggregation function, which the documentation doesn't guarantee a correct answer, which is a bit weird, so I never use that. But it's faster and probably cheaper. Order by, or a word about order by. Here's the thing about big data. It has limitations in terms of technology because it requires a lot of resources to process the data. So as a rule of thumb, if you can avoid it, please avoid order by. Why? If you do order by on large amounts of data, you most likely end up of exhausting the resources of GCP, BigQuery for your query. This is an unfortunate thing that happens. Doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen if you use order by, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you optimize your query. So this is my tip in terms of performance.
So what to do if you want to order by?
Optimize your query. Divide it into several queries. Do a pipeline. There's a lot of things you can do, but unfortunately, for example, in AWS, in Athena, you can contact support and tell them something like this: listen, I need more resources. They will say, you cannot do this, but try again next hour. Because sometimes it's a matter of auto-scaling in the background. But for GCP, the amount of resources is fixed, at least according to the message, the error message they give you. Okay? Sometimes they let you exceed it if they think they will finish, but eventually they tell you by how much you exceeded. The maximum I exceeded was 212% from the limit. Yes, please.
What about clustering?
Clustering is a good way to save money. Personally, I didn't use it because it could have performance side effects.
What do you mean?
Here's the thing. It's kind of hard to explain, so I'll do my best. Table, okay, you have columns. So when you partition by day, yes? Okay, so let's take one partition, let's talk about this. You have more columns inside, right? So clustering is about sorting your data according to some logic. You can do up to 4 columns, right? What happens?
You need specific order of them.
And you need a specific order. So for a specific query that will run very fast, for another query it will run very slow because of the sorting. So this is your trade-off. On the one hand, it will save you money, but on the other hand, it will be a performance issue.
And you need to use the partitioning key.
Yes.
I mean, if it's partitioned by day, then you probably want to limit the days that you are referring to.
Yes, but the clustering has some more cases you need to specify in the creation.
Partition by days too, and also with the clustering.
What is the question?
You can say from like last week, partition last week, and then do the clustering by the sorting that I put 1, 2, 3, right? Like it's not all.
No, it's not or, it's combined.
Yeah,
You partition by date, always by date.
So you say that it's the performance will get worse, but the cost will get so.
The idea about clustering is as follows. If BigQuery knows the data is sorted, it can do data skipping and take only the relevant chunks per partition. But in terms of performance, it might slow down, that's it. So if you don't care about performance, do it. Okay? Questions?
Yeah.
Did-
What about order by inside partition by? You know,
Tricky. It might end up slowing you down, might end up in a failure in the query. You just have to experiment, try and check it out if it works for you. Okay? As a rule of thumb, don't do order by in big data. It's basically meaningless. But in some cases you have to, I know.
But on an aggregated data, at the end of the query, when
Do it. In the end, yes. If you have sub-queries on the last layer, do order by, it's okay. But again, if the result set is too big, sorting 10 terabytes in memory is unlikely to finish. Again, this is something, for example, ScreamDB is very good at. It's designed to do sort on a lot of data. Okay, so not trying to sell anything, just on a technical level. Tips to avoid. You should know that there's a response to large, which is what we discussed. you should avoid joins as much as possible. That's good practice, generally speaking, in big data. There's a lot of window functions. If you're not familiar with this, get yourself familiar with this. It will slow down your query, but in terms of cost, it will be useful.
Question.
Yes,
Wonder
please.
why inside window functions.
Good luck. Again, it might change. I don't have something concrete to say about this. Sorry. Okay.
Basically, window functions work after the data is retrieved. Then you can partition it, and then you can sort it inside every partition. So it's different than the order by of the entire set. Okay? Because it works on the
On the small
result
part of
of
partition.
the result that was already fetched. So I don't think that it works the same.
But you can then do a nested query or something like that, or weave, and then come to the join.
Yeah,
You clean
yeah,
the data.
you could, yes.
So it would be the same, right?
I don't know for sure, so I don't want to confuse you. Part 2, external tools. Someone asked me about how I got the dollar signs. Apparently there's a tool called BigQuery Mate. It's a Chrome extension for free, and it works. But bear in mind that sometimes it's an approximation, not an accurate number, because sometimes BigQuery does sometimes things you're not expecting. But as a rule of thumb, it kind of reflects reality, so use it. If you combine that with quotas and you're exceeding your quota, you get a message like this. This is how it looks. Query usage per user per day exceeded, contact your administrator. SuperQuery. SuperQuery, again, no commercial benefits for me. We use it here in investing. We implemented this tool about a year ago. It's an Israeli-based startup. They claim that they can do a lot of cost saving while working on BigQuery natively, meaning they give you an IDE. You can switch between the BigQuery IDE and the SuperQuery freely and easily. You just write your queries here, and you get the estimation here, and a lot of things on top of that. For example, you got a lot more tabs. You can go 30, 40 tabs. In BigQuery, you're limited to 5 tabs. Not sure why. You can create boards, which is like workbooks. So you can save a workflow of queries for later doing an ETL process and automating that. You can share a board with other users. It's very friendly. It's like a notebook, like Zeppelin. You can do a lot of things, and you can save your queries in GitHub, which is nice. And one other thing, they do caching in the background automatically for you. So their caching works a bit better than, in my opinion, than BigQuery. So they claim they can save up to 65% of your query cost by doing nothing, just simply by using them. SuperQuery use is good for when you are doing a lot of analysis and you're letting your data science experiment on data. So it saves money there. A lot of money can be saved via BI tools where you have a lot of history which is repeated every day. For example, every day you want to see the last 30 days. That the only day that will change is yesterday. So why pay for the other 29 partitions which are not being changed? They have a connector for Airflow. Again, for the same purposes, if you're overwriting the last 14 days like we do, this can save you some money. De facto, on our use case, on our queries, on our data department, as a rule of thumb, between 12% to 62% per query in terms of cost reduction. So
Is it free, open source?
No. You have to pay 10% of the data scan. So as you can see here, in the worst case, you'll break even. Yes, please.
The error, like from 12 to 62 is very big. Can you explain like when it's 12 and when it's 62% or something like that? You have time?
It really depends. It really depends on the amount of data which is immutable. Meaning if you are querying the last year, and you're most likely to only to save a lot of money because someone queried that and the rest of the department running a query on the same data will be using the cache, not the scan. But if it's a use case where nobody scanned that data lately, so you will be paying full price. As simple as that, like any other caching. Okay?
Is it only interactive or it's for batch processing as well?
I believe it's both. We use mostly interactive, so good question. They have a new feature which we use lately to understand some of our bad practices in the workflows that suggests cost saving. They actually point out the query that needs to be rewritten in terms of cost. And the thing is, the theory that it lets you focus on R&D and not on cost reduction. So it's I believe it's a matter of what's important to you in terms of professional level. As a data engineer, for me, it's very important to understand the cost structure, so I'll be able to recommend a good architecture. But an analyst doesn't need to consider or bother himself with the cost of a query. He needs to query data, so that could be very useful. Some of our analysts are using that, but bear in mind, it's not a perfect tool. It's a startup. It has some issues, but it's maturing quickly, and the version releases are relatively in a short period. So every time there's a new version, new features, and it's quite useful. We haven't stopped working it with, so think about it if you like. Part 3, data pipeline, each use case, different solution. Streaming batch review. This slide has the most impact in terms of cost in investing.com. We don't do streaming because for us there's no actual need to query data which is hot say last hour, okay? We do aggregations, we do analysis on days, weeks, months, years. So for us it's meaningless. Batch review. The traditional approach would be do an ETL, take an ETL tool, generate a data pipeline, create the table, do what you need. However, we discovered that about 60% of our workload can be used with views. So instead of an ETL, you have a raw data. You put a view on top of that fixes everything for you in terms of transformation, cleansing, everything. Then you let the analyst run on top of that. So what you gain? You gain in terms of maintenance simplicity, but you pay for what you use. Meaning you save the cost of the ETL during the night, the automation, the servers, whatever. But you pay more on more data scans. But as a rule of thumb, if you investigate how many queries you actually write in a month, you save money. A lot of it, apparently. So this is my trick. But that's not always the best thing to do. If you have a recurring heavy query, 5 minutes. A recurring heavy query, use some sort of orchestration tool, build an ETL pipeline, especially if the raw data is huge. I mean, build an aggregation layer. On top of that, let the analysts work on the aggregation layer. It's not very expensive to create this pipeline using Airflow and BigQuery, and it will save you a lot of money. For example, to analyze the Google Analytics data, we create layers on top of layers on top of layers. And we paid in terms of maintenance about a month's work, but ever since, we're saving a lot of money. Streaming, do it if you only must. Okay, orchestration. I use personally Airflow. There's a lot of reason why you should use an orchestration tool. It doesn't really matter which. I personally prefer Airflow because it's open source and it's free. Specifically in GCP, you have a Composer, which is a managed solution of Airflow, which kind of lets you get started really, really quick. Since import and export is free, you can do pipelines very easily and cost effectively. There are some cases you might want to use Dataproc, which is the Hadoop, so managed solution Hadoop of GCP to create the pipeline. It could be up to 50% cheaper than BigQuery, but the downside in maintenance, so take that carefully into consideration. I did some tests for ingestion and transformation, 50% cost reduction. For modeling, which is the layer on top, it could be sometimes even more expensive, so be careful with that.
What about performance? BigQuery versus Dataproc? I mean, this is Hadoop.
If you want to do an honest-to-God benchmark, I can pretty much guarantee I can do both ways, meaning I can prove BigQuery is faster in some use cases, and I can prove Hadoop will be faster in other use cases. So it's only a matter of use case. As a rule of thumb, Hadoop will be easier. Why? Because in order to gain the performance benefits of Hadoop, you need to fine-tune, לגרז, לשמן a lot. There's the most popular blog I've ever written in the last 3 years is Spark Tuning. Apparently it has 100 times more page views than any other blog I've written. So it's a problem for most of the world. The reason why I don't use Hadoop because the maintenance overhead is big for me. And I prefer to work on the logic of the data and the insight, whereas tune the cluster. But sometimes, well, you have to roll up your sleeves and do the job and tune your cluster. Part for architecture. So a general rule of thumb. I didn't invent this, but I researched a lot until I got this architecture. So open your ears. This will save you money. This layer is all about ingestion. All you have to do is take your data sources and make sure in the technology stack you choose here that the data gets into the system. That sounds trivial, but it's not. In this layer, transformation. You take the data from here, change it however you like in the technology you want, and move it to the next layer for the modeling, for the analyst to work with. And in this layer, it's like a caching layer for this layer for your BI tools. Why you do all this? Why you do this? This will save you a lot of money, but you pay in maintenance. You have to create an ETL that takes this data, aggregates, computes the data, only save the results that's here in the BI tool instead of accessing BigQuery and accessing all the way the raw data, scanning 1 terabyte a day. It will scan 1 megabyte a day. This will be like a massive cost reduction. This is one trick. The other trick is the view we discussed. You ingest the raw data here, you put a view, and you let analysts, on a rare occasion, analyze the data, and you'll pay only for what you use.
View cached. For example, if I create a view and I query about this view.
I'm thinking.
For BigQuery, it's this.
I would bet.
job, you know,
I would bet no. I would bet no. Don't count on it.
Okay.
On the other way around, if you use view on top of a subquery, you might end up paying a lot more. So you have to be very careful, especially when your subquery contains highly nested column. JSON key value, key value, key value, because parsing that key value is expensive. So you think you will be querying one row, but eventually you're doing full scan. So you have to be very careful. Test it. We paid a lot of effort paying attention to that.
And the storage is the BigQuery.
Here's the thing. It can be anything you want. This architecture is decoupled, meaning each layer can be a different technology whatsoever. So it's all Mars technology. This is for you. It's all about your use case. So you can do for the ingestion one technology, and for the modeling another, and for the BI something else entirely. Okay? But the key thing is, if you decouple and you save your data in the storage and let each layer read the data, you can do a lot of things. That means if you use BigQuery here, it's too expensive, you can switch it to another technology, and vice versa. As a rule of thumb, if you're just starting out, put BigQuery all the way and adapt. But make sure everything is decoupled. Okay? Even if you pay twice, once is your raw data, once is when you insert the data. The amount of money you pay for the storage on GCS is minimal, so it's worth your time. This is the technology stack we're using here. We're using BigQuery all the way. In the transformation, we used Hive and Spark SQL. We are using SuperQuery in the modeling layer, and we do some machine learning. We're not going to discuss it here.
What do you use for the BI tools?
The previous slide, please.
Like what you recommend to use on top of BigQuery for BI?
It's a matter of choose your poison. Do a benchmark with the top vendors, say top 3. Select
Yeah,
what I'm using.
you know, if they're,
If you believe Gartner, in the top Magic Quadrant, there's Power BI and Tableau.
Tableau.
I use personally Tableau, but I'm not an expert there, so.
I was thinking
Oh,
more, you know,
sorry?
if Looker is something more, you know.
Looker.
It's going into the GCP.
Yeah, Looker, I believe, was bought by Google or supported by Google, something like that. Looker is a very popular solution. Personally, I don't like it because it doesn't have a strong backend like Tableau does. But I could be biased. I didn't use Looker too much. And there's a lot of things you can do in the middle in terms of performance and cost when you use Tableau, so it's my choice. Word of advice, there's Data Studio by Google. It's free and very easy and very tempting to work on top of BigQuery. Be very, very careful. $50 query ended up in $450 a day for me. I thought the query only is read once, but apparently every time I refreshed, chicking, 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 and eventually I got an invoice of $450. So you have to be very careful.
You can do data ingestion and data modeling with Spark as well.
Yes. In previous company, I did that.
It's not this slide.
No, this is the slide about this company. So summary, how do you think I saved 80% in investing? I'll give you an example, I'll give you numbers. When I came to this company, started working on this project, the monthly invoice was $3,000. We processed about 20 terabytes. A year after, we were processing 100 terabytes, and we're still being billed $3,000
A month?
a month. So basically, I did I built an architecture which is faster, cheaper, and simpler than what was previously existing, which is what I showed you, and applied everything we discussed. I gave you all my tricks, everything. Okay? So every project you do, every query you write, every ETL you do, consult with your big data architect. Think about cost as part of the equation, and eventually you'll be saving costs. Okay? After 1 month of entering the company, I reduced the $3,000 to $600 simply by doing the quotas. I changed nothing. I only applied the quotas. Start with that. Start educating your team. Get the bits and bytes of GCP, BigQuery, and believe me, you will save a lot more if you care about costs. So call for action, please register to all 3 meetups. You can download the detailed lectures about AWS Big Data Demystified if you want to know how I save costs there, what was the architecture considerations there. Please, please, please subscribe to the YouTube. It will help me a lot to raise awareness to the community. As you can see, it's all about knowledge sharing. This is the links of the meetups and the YouTube channels, my credentials, and that's it. Thank you very much. Questions before I close the video? Yes, please.
Yeah, BigQuery can save you a lot of money,
Yes.
but once you start with it, it's hard to get rid of it because it's
Not exactly. And so,
right?
so you're asking if, what are you asking? You're saying BigQuery is, there is a trade-off. Yes. Basically, the trade-off is architecture-wise, meaning you have pay-as-you-go solutions and fixed price, yes? Say Hadoop, for example, ignore the maintenance and performance and everything, just cost. Or any Teradata, Vertica, whatever. Database, server, you pay for the server, you tochen אותו, and you pay only for the server. Whereas you pay as you go, you pay for a query. And it's tempting to get started here, but there is a point it will switch. It will be cheaper to use flat rate. However, there's another trading point, flipping point. Apparently, I didn't know that in the beginning where I started, BigQuery has flat rate feature. You can pay a fixed amount of dollars per month. You commit to it, by the way, and you use freely. What's the downside?
Commitment.
Commitment, 1, 2.
It's expensive.
Forget the expensive. Why you נתפסת לדקויות של כסף? You pay what you committed, what you're comfortable. You say $20,000 to say it's good enough for you, okay? What's the downside? You get limited amount, not limited, fixed amount of resources for your query. So if you say you have 100 analysts, you have to manage the resources. And when you pay as you go, you're not limited. You get the whole full balagan. Yes? Any more questions? Yes, please.
Other disadvantages of BigQuery, if you can.
Other disadvantages of BigQuery?
But no SQL, no schema.
There's a lot, but you have to understand. I take pride that I can take any database and make it beg for mercy. There's no such thing as the fastest database. There's no such thing as the best database. Every database is good for a specific set of use cases. Okay, so if you ask me, if your ecosystem is around marketing, GCP BigQuery is a good start because everything is מתנקז. Funnels into BigQuery with the press of a button. So it does not make sense to start moving your data around. But there are other use cases. BigQuery is a very good tool, very popular. There's a lot of good use cases you can run on BigQuery, but you have to be careful. You need an architect. That's it. Please.
What are you saying about BigQuery ML?
BigQuery ML. Cool thing. really. BigQuery ML, I played with this a little bit, wrote a clustering algorithm that runs on the traffic data and divides the user to several groups. It was very nice. Apparently, I got insights of the data. I was surprised to know, for example, there are users that come only once, and that's it. And apparently, there's a lot of them. It's good. I use that as a benchmarking for the data scientist models. When he writes something, develops for 2 months, and then I do a clustering algorithm and we do head-to-head. If it doesn't improve my result, he did something wrong. Okay? This is, by the way, a recommendation by Google in their last meetup. Yes, please.
You have described your approach and some of the best practices you've arrived at, and I admire your expertise. And I'm wondering if you could take a sabbatical and spend a year just improving the tooling. What are some of the major pain points, the inefficiencies in this workflow that you would address?
So the question was, in theory, if I can take 1 year sabbatical, what would I do? What the main pain points I will focus on to solve them? Well, I did something similar in one of the previous companies I work with, Walla. AWS Big Data Demystified, start there. There's 10 hours in YouTube where I kind of run through all the pain points. It's kind of hard to answer that, but I would focus on one cloud, learn the ecosystem, and pros and cons of each technology before I start, and understand the difference between data lake and data warehouse. I would avoid using Hadoop in the beginning, and I will get familiar with the data science solutions in the cloud, because that also saves a lot of time. Especially if you're starting something new, starting in the cloud will save you a lot of time. You want to spend less time on infrastructure and more on your business logic. That would be my opinion. Creating an architecture which is perfect takes time. So if you can spare the time in your company, do it. If not, take outside consults, pay the $400 an hour, and you should be fine. Believe me, it will save you time and money and headache. Lots of headaches. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.